In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Brian Fry, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbardis, Nathan Lutz, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome all you lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. Welcome to the show where we watch movies and then talk about them. I am your host, Russell Guest, and joining me today is my good friend and co-host from deep in the heart of Texas, Dustin Melbardis. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing excellent, representing Nisora Two Skies Dojo under Master Lance England, trained in Ishinryu and the Tao of Pooh from University of Tennessee, the hidden dojo underneath the Hyper Building. You look like a worthy opponent, Russell.
Oh, I bow. But I keep my eyes on you while I'm bowing.
That's one of the rules, even if you
that
break
is one
it
of the rules
in the movie.
And you know what another good rule is?
No, what?
Always have a great guest on your podcast. Here today with us is Meredith Robson from here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. How are you doing, Meredith?
Good. It's really, really good to be here, even on this very stormy night in Pittsburgh, it seems.
That's right.
Very excited.
Fun fact, Meredith designed the logo that you're looking at on your phone for the podcast. So she is a graphic designer extraordinaire. Meredith, do you want to tell people where they can find out more of your graphic design products, such as gift wrap?
Well, you can go on society6.com/Meredith Gray Robson. There's lots of stuff on there. You also can find a Retro Movie Roundtable t-shirt on there if you would like it.
I have a couple, and I like them.
Yep, there's also a lot of animal designs if you like animals. There's tigers, horses, flamingos, all that sort of thing.
Is there a frog?
There's not, but there is a snail.
There's a snail. Okay.
There's a
Do
snail.
You have plans
if you like slime, there's a snail.
Okay, sure. That's the connection between frog and snail. I was wondering how you made that jump, no pun intended. But maybe when you do release something frog-related, give me a call. I want in on that.
Okay,
requests.
Sure, will do.
Yeah. So, Meredith, I want to ask you, what is your favorite movie sword? Because I know you're a bit of a sword enthusiast.
Yes, I am actually a collector of swords. I have a few, but my favorite movie sword specifically, and I think it's pronounced Hadafang from Lord of the Rings. It's actually the sword that Liv Tyler uses in the movie. It's just really beautiful. I have a replica of it. The thing that I think is great about it is that it's sort of a cross between a European design and a katana, which is really what I prefer as far as the functionality and look of a sword. So it's got a nice curve. It's kind of like a cavalry saber. You can use it on horseback. It's just beautiful.
Wow. Dustin, do you have a favorite movie sword?
I do, and I almost started putting together like a top 10 of favorite movie swords, but I stopped myself. I'm going to go with the top of the list is the Green Destiny from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. That fluid sword is just a beautiful sword with like the design along the blade itself. It's kind of wobbly by design. The presence of this sword kind of drives the whole movie, honestly. And I think what's kind of neat about it is you get to see Chow Yun-fat, Michelle Yeoh, and Zhang Ziyi all wield it kind of differently. So it's the top of my list. I had a lot of other things to list. Leonidas' Falcata, Achilles' Gladius, the Bride's sword, the Hattori Hanzo sword from Kill Bill. There's a lot of places on the list. I haven't put it fully together yet. Maybe next time, listeners.
Yeah. You can hit it on the social media too.
I'll put it on.
Yeah, but the thing I really liked about the Lord of the Rings sword is it was designed specifically for the movie. It was never in the book, so it looks pretty different to everything else that you see in Lord of the Rings.
Well, this one might be too straight edge for you guys, so my pick's going to be Inigo Montoya's rapier from Princess Bride.
Oh,
That's a great pick. Russell, I specifically left it off the list because I like who's wielding it. I don't think it's the sword that I particularly like. I just like Inigo Montoya so much.
I think I'm being largely influenced by who's wielding it. You're right, but on the other hand, so yeah, just going in a whole nother direction with that. And then, fun question, Meredith, what's the last movie you saw?
so the last movie I saw was called Gunpowder Milkshake, and it's on Netflix. So it's kind of funny because it seemed to be very Bruce Lee influenced. It was really good. It was interesting. They had a great variety of weapons. It was also a little bit 70s, so that was fun. Karen Gillan is the lead actress, so she's always fun.
Yeah. And Dustin, what's your last movie that you saw?
Oh, that one sounds good. My last movie I saw was a year before Enter the Dragon came out. The Big Boss was released. While I was preparing for this movie, I just got into the Bruce Lee mode, so I watched The Big Boss as well.
Okay. Well, we might ask a little bit more about that later then for points of comparison. My last movie that I watched was 1938's Bringing Up Baby. It's just one of those movies that's been on the AFI comedies list, and I noticed it was sitting there on HBO Max to be watched, and I said, I'm going to check this out. It is a very pleasant, fun time.
It is. And you would never do some of the things now that they do in that movie.
No.
Don't want to spoil it, but you would never do that now.
No, you're right. I think that's part of the cool thing about it. You couldn't... I don't think this movie's going to get remade, so...
No. And if you did, it would be terrible because it wouldn't,
Yeah,
wouldn't be the same.
absolutely.
How's the kung fu in it?
There is a disturbing lack of kung fu, which we need to get correct today, because today we're doing Enter the Dragon. From 1973, it stars the infamous Bruce Lee, John Saxon, Jim Kelly, Ahna Capri, Bob Wall. It is budgeted for $850,000, and it makes a whole lot more. It grosses $21.4 million. So, big returns for this one. It places at 13th on the box office. It is coming behind The World's Greatest Athlete and ahead of Sleeper with Woody Allen. The number one movie from 1973 is The Exorcist. No kung fu, but definitely some cranial gymnastics on that one. So IMDb gives Enter the Dragon a 7.7. Rotten Tomatoes critics give it a 95%, so the critics love this movie. And the audience loves it too, at 91%. It's interesting the IMDb rating is considerably lower at 7.7. So, this was the first Chinese martial arts film ever produced for a major Hollywood studio. It is often regarded as the movie that started the kung fu craze in America that went through the 70s and beyond, and just started an entire genre. So, Meredith, tell us, had you seen Enter the Dragon before, and what was your background with it?
So I'd heard of it for a long time, just probably like everybody else. But about 3 years ago, I was watching one of those, the movie channel was like Epix or Cinemax or something like that. And I saw a scene close to the end, and I was so intrigued, I couldn't stop watching it, even though it was, not the beginning of the movie. I had to see it through, and then they played it later that day, so I watched it again. And I was just so taken with it. So that's really my history with it.
Yeah, and how is it holding up for you?
It holds up, I think, very well. There are only a couple of things probably with the script that I would not have done, and also the sound, but we'll get into that later probably.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Dustin, how about you? Have you seen Enter the Dragon before?
Yes, I had in high school. I think we've talked before about sometimes the weekend comes around and you're hanging out with your buds and you put on a movie that you've all seen before. You just kind of have it on while you fall asleep, or like, hey, tonight we're going to do some Charles Bronson movies, or tonight we're going to do Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, Val Kilmer. We're going to do something, and sometimes we would do Bruce Lee. And so we just had like a recorded VHS of this movie, and so we would watch this one. But I will say, admittedly, and there's a lot of movies that fall into this category, I think we would just fast forward to the fight scenes.
Okay, yeah, and I've heard some comments. Brian Fry is somebody who does a lot of that too. So, in terms of skipping to the monumental scene.
Well, if you notice on YouTube, there's a lot of, clips from Bruce Lee movies that just have a ton of views, and it's pretty much just the fights. You get a few bits of dialogue in there on YouTube, but what people are watching, I think, is still the fights.
Oh, totally.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, I was actually taken aback because I really thought I had seen Enter the Dragon, but I think I've seen a different Bruce Lee movie, to which I'm now curious which one I've seen, because when I watched Enter the Dragon again, I was expecting a walkthrough again, and I was like, this is starting differently than I remembered, and sure enough, I had not seen this movie, so I thought I had seen it, and I've been going around saying, like, yeah, Bruce Lee, Enter the Dragon, I've seen that, it's a classic, and now I'm sitting there going, like, which other classic did I see? So it's a mystery, and we'll have to continue to solve that someday, but I liked Enter the Dragon for the first time, and it's a lot of fun, and I can definitely see that this is a massively influential movie, so the ripple effect off of it, it's huge, and it's kind of sad too, in that this is Bruce Lee's last complete movie too. So it just as he is ascending to superstardom, not just stardom, but like global superstardom, he meets an untimely death, and that's so sad. But we will spoil Enter the Dragon, so if you haven't seen it, please do, and we will be back after these messages.
Welcome to the Flashback Flicks Retro Movie Podcast. I'm Ricky.
I'm Grayson.
And every week we review a movie from the past and reflect on things we missed, things we loved, and things we want to see again.
Yeah, because we believe any movie worth watching is worth watching again.
So if you like films, friendship, and a lot of callbacks,
I mean, just so many callbacks,
then subscribe on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever RSS feeds go for like-minded movie-loving individuals. Like you.
What happens when two modern film fans go back and rewatch all the old classic films from yesteryear to see if they hold up? You get the Classic Film Jerks podcast. Find the Classic Film Jerks podcast on all the major platforms.
All right, we're back, and if this is your final warning, we will be spoiling Enter the Dragon. And Dustin, for those who haven't seen Enter the Dragon since 1973, do you want to give people a refresher?
Open on Shaolin Monastery as our hero Lee defeats a game Sammo Hung and waxes philosophical about martial arts. An opportunity to work for outsider Braithwaite to undo the damage of a renegade monk and reclaim the lost honor of the temple presents itself, hidden in a tournament on a secluded island. And while you're at it, Lee, how about you find evidence of drug trafficking and the deaths of several working women, okay? We'll have your back by listening for a radio signal. A semblance of a tournament is held, including Americans Williams and Roper, who seem to be more interested in gambling on each other than fighting. Williams gets distracted by a bird and beaten in hand-to-iron prosthetic hand combat with Han, the monk from before. Roper decides to rebuff Han's offer to expand the drug market into the U.S., and Lee does manage to send a message with that radio to Braithwaite in the very early morning hours before single-handedly whooping a whole bunch of guards and then getting trapped in a box. What's left to do? Release a bunch of recovering drunk prisoners to take down the remaining kung fu fighters at this kung fu school and then defeat Han in single combat so that you can then be extracted by a couple choppers with a new American friend, I guess? Roll credits on a prosthetic bear claw.
Yes. Now, Meredith, what do you think about the story? You mentioned you might have made some changes in the screenplay. How is the plot for you in this one?
So I think it's actually very modern and a little bit ahead of its time. The thing that I would really have changed is the death of the sister. I feel like she should turn that piece of glass on that guy in the barn and then, help him infiltrate this place.
Okay.
I think if this movie were made today, she probably wouldn't have died. I also think that probably one of our main fighters would have been a woman. If you made it today, not in the 70s. Would it be
better if they had her and were holding her alive?
I think it might be very dramatic. Yeah, but I would have kept her because I feel like she's an underutilized character and she's such a good actress and martial artist. It just seems,
Or she could be a prisoner
like
on the island.
Like a wrong decision. Yeah.
That would be cool.
She should be in the movie more than she is.
Wow.
You made a whole lot of good points.
No, wow, you're coming out swinging on this one, because you're right. Now I'm imagining her getting loose on the island and adding to the mayhem of karate and martial arts that are being thrown at everybody. Yeah, that would be fun. That would be fun.
And I did do a little bit of research on her, and she really is a great martial artist. It just seems, like a missed opportunity.
Angela, now, you're right. It is a missed opportunity. She's in the movie for 4 minutes, Russell. She's in the movie for 4 total minutes. And that scene, I agree with what you say. She should have taken that piece of glass and turned it on O'Hara. He's got a scar over his eye. Why is it not the glass that gave it this? It was the old man, whose name, by the way, creatively is Old Man. He's the one that gave him the scar. I completely agree with you. That was in many points, but I think the overarching point is that's kind of a missed opportunity in terms of the plot and her involvement in the movie. I'm with you.
Well, it's interesting. So I think that there's some of this movie that actually is borrowing from the James Bond series, and it might be just because I'm such a James Bond fan, as I say over and over again on this podcast. But I see so many similarities to him being kind of this secret agent that's being sent in from this agency, and that's not so much the British government in this case, but just more of the this global agency in the shadows, and they're sending him in, by the way, with no guns or no gadgets or anything like that. Just just fists of fury, if you will. So, I think the notion of globetrotting to this exotic island and being in this tournament, I just got this James Bond vibe. And the funny thing is, James Bond took influence and changed its course largely off of this movie. One of the reasons I'm getting this vibe so much is from Man with a Golden Gun, but this movie comes out just a year prior to, and undoubtedly kicked off the kung fu craze that was on there as James Bond goes to face off with a one-on-one showdown on an island in the Orient. So it's interesting. I like that I like that spy component to this, and I actually could have fast forwarded through some of the beginning parts where he was coming out of his monastery, and I was kind of thinking, wow, it's cool that he's had this training, but I kind of want to fast forward through that and just get right into the fact that he's into spying and sleuthing and that sort of thing. Like, to me, that was where this movie started to pick up for me.
Well, I also like that it was sort of like a little bit of a classic literature take, like The Most Dangerous Game, or the, the Agatha Christie, And Then There Were None. So the island business is kind of classical, I think.
I'm so glad you said a literature reference that I knew. I know The Most Dangerous Game. I don't know Agatha Christie, but I think whenever it's Chad and I talking about literature, I think we're on an Animorphs kick. So we don't usually get into the actual good literature. We've been talking about Goosebumps and Animorphs. So thank you for bringing a little culture to the round table.
No, I always liked the Animorphs.
Oh, totally.
I always thought that was cool.
Yeah. So with the spy aspect, Russell, whenever you say something like, I wish I could have fast forwarded through this part, there is potentially the connotation that means this part wasn't as necessary and there's a cooler part to be gotten to. I wish there would have been more time with learning how Lee is going to work as this secret agent type character. From how, as the movie is put together right now, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense why or how he is able to, or he is plucked, or like what the reasoning is behind why he's there, or what skill set he has. As you said, there are no gadgets. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't any use of tools. He does make an excellent use of a tool in the form of a snake later on in the movie. But it seemingly there's, if we just had 5-7 minutes of showing him maybe even talking to a quartermaster or just something that gets us from a conversation with Braithwaite and a manila folder to, okay, now you're our super spy and we're going to send you in. I feel like there's a little bit of disjointedness there.
Yeah, we sound critical on this because I really did enjoy this, so I don't want to I don't want to say that I didn't, because I really did. So the thing that I'm wondering is, what if, and maybe I'm turning this too into James Bond, you can tell me to stop doing that if I need to, but what if he was already working with these people before, and you see him come off of a mission before he goes on to this mission? And it's personal, because of the people who trained him. You can even do a little flashback to say, this is where I trained, and this guy has corrupted the monastery that has prepared me for the world, and so you can actually see Bruce Lee do a little more awesome fighting at the very open of this movie before he then gets deployed to Han's Island.
I've got an answer for that. Meredith, do you have an answer for that question? Because I've got one. Like, why isn't
I don't. I think I would have. I'm on a totally different track, but I'll say that in a second. You go ahead.
I think the thing is, that would be awesome. It would make the movie better than it already is. And the reason why it's not that way is because that's not what Bruce Lee wanted. I think he does have a little bit of a signature on this movie. And if you gave him the option of including the, as I mentioned in the plot summary, the sort of waxing philosophical about what fighting is and his mantras and these rules about martial arts, I think he wanted to have that in there. If I were a Hollywood agent, or if I'm a producer putting this together, would have sounded more like Russell and said, why don't we have him like escaping out of some other mission and see, oh, we know this guy. He's already an established secret agent. Look at that successful mission. Like what happens in a lot of the Bond movies. So Russell, you are, kind of leaning into the what's common in the Bond movies, but that's not a bad thing. It's just because you're having Bruce Lee's signature on this, he's going to put the Shaolin Temple and the honor of martial arts sort of in there somewhere.
No, that's a very fair point. He does have some authorship of what you're talking about, and you're right. This is Bruce
sort of the Jeet Kune Do philosophy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, Meredith.
But what I
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was thinking that Braithwaite might have been looking for somebody who Han was not expecting, because Lee comes from the same temple as Han did, and Han might be thinking, oh, this is somebody who's like me, who wants to, go the path that I've gone in life. And then he just doesn't expect when he gets turned on.
You're right.
That's what I would think. If I were Braithwaite, I would want somebody who had no association with any kind of agency or operation or anything that Han could figure out.
Or it could
Isn't
just be
it
simply, we need to send somebody in with mad martial arts skills, and we hear you're the best. Like, it could just be that simple,
also.
too.
I think that's probably what Bruce would say.
Isn't it cool?
Or something to that effect.
Yeah, when somebody on the podcast brings up something, we're only 20 minutes in, and I didn't think about like looking at it from Braithwaite's point of view in that way. We do need a martial artist because this is a martial arts tournament that we are having you infiltrate. And there are other people, Parsons, Williams, John Saxon's character. Why am I dropping his name? But essentially, like this, we
Roper?
do need a martial artist. Roper, thank you.
Yeah.
We do need a martial artist. But I still think if we just had a little bit of time with show us the spy training or the spy background, it would be awesome. But I didn't think about the Han would recognize this other Shaolin martial artist and perhaps think you're corruptible or you're here for a reason. That's
Yeah, you're just like me.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I see myself in you. No, that's a good point. And I do think the whole point of the tournament, as he said, like it's a way to bring in the best, so I can recruit the best.
Yeah.
So, I think that he didn't play up the fact that I think he should have just been like, plus it's really awesome. I like to watch people fight.
That is awesome. That is great.
If you're a drug lord and a master of corruption, you can just have these extravagant things. So why not? I mean, I think they didn't play up the rich, eccentric gangster aspect of that enough. Of just like, I have a fight tournament. Why? Because I like fight tournaments.
The cruelest thing perhaps of all is he has that big decadent party or banquet and we always jump around with the movie. He has that big banquet, and you have two sumo wrestlers fighting as sort of a centerpiece of entertainment. Sumo matches last seconds. The longest a sumo match can go is 4 minutes. And sumo matches don't end in ties. The last tie that happened was a year after Enter the Dragon release, was in '74. So you're going to have these two sumo wrestlers just fight during an entire banquet. They're going to pass out of exhaustion. That's opulence if you can pay a sumo wrestler enough to fight for hours, because they're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Meredith, do you see where this movie, we talked about it's spawning a whole genre, but be more specific. Like, are there places where you see Enter the Dragon directly influencing other movies, whether it be from a parody standpoint or just from a, like, hey, I was inspired by this?
Well, there are some that are very obvious, like The Matrix. I know that's, it's an American movie, but it is a martial arts movie. But also a lot of the superhero shows. I don't think that The Arrow and Daredevil would be what they are without Bruce Lee. And even if you look at movies like the Ocean's 11 remakes, the way that it's shot is very Enter the Dragon. It's very whip pan and stop and whip pan and stop. And the music, the rhythmic cutting of Ocean's 11 is more like Enter the Dragon than it is the original Ocean's 11. So, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much everywhere. I think the Marvel Shang-Chi that's coming out pretty soon, if you look at the comics, they look a lot like a Bruce Lee movie. So, yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah. Mortal Kombat is another one that comes to my mind, like having a fighting tournament. And
yeah, there's even a boat. There's a boat scene in Mortal Kombat where they're all sort of, testing each other's limits.
Bloodsport being another one that like comes to mind. That would which by the way we've covered. So that's another fun one to check out on our podcast if you don't get enough martial arts fighting in.
It is fair to say that this is the progenitor of what we know big silver screen movie fighting to be. Like, and everything can probably trace back to this or some of the other Warner Brothers affiliated, Golden Harvest affiliated movies of the 70s that came across. This one, clearly, I think there's things with Bruce Lee as an icon that will live forever. The Jeet Kune Do style, whether or not it is written down anywhere, there are people that are practitioners. It just is so very obvious and new. Bruce Lee's devotion to the body, to like his diet and his training as opposed to just technique. It was about his physicality. There's so much there that I think is reflected in a lot of future martial arts, big time movies. So this deserves the respect that I think it gets. The scores that you said, Russell, the 95 and the 91%, there's a reason why people rate this high, and I think it would be because it is kind of the number one, like kind of first on the list for people. Like this started a whole genre.
Yeah, I think we picked on some of its writing a little bit, but I think that if you transport yourself back to 1973, there just isn't anything in our cinema here in the West that was scratching this itch. And then all of a sudden, there was a new genre dropped on your doorstep. And that's a pretty amazing thing when you think about it, to have something that's that out of the woodwork come out. And the fact is, it's based in something very ancient. Martial arts is a real thing. And that's the cool thing that's about Bruce Lee. He's captivating to watch because he's flat out doing, his hands are moving that fast. And his kicks and stuff aren't on wires. And everything that he's doing is the result of amazing training. So in a way, he's kind of this superhero person in real life. And to some degree, I'm starting to see where for so many, the plot very, very, very much is secondary to just, he was a spectacle in the Green Hornet and he captured people's attentions right away. And they were excited to see a major movie with this guy who just does things that we just haven't seen before, and they blew people's minds. And I think that gets lost to some degree at this point in time, but it's good to pause and think about that.
Well, and Bruce Lee is, I think, a much better actor than most people who haven't seen his movies would think. And, he talks about in the movie the art of fighting without fighting. And he's almost like he has this art of acting without talking. He does so much, with his body and with his eyes. And, the way he looks at Roper when they do the cricket or the praying mantis battle where they're betting on it. There's just so much communication from him that's non-verbal. And I think that sort of stuck to action movies from then on.
Yeah. Now, it takes almost 20 minutes before Williams and Roper enter the story, and they too have backstories, and Bruce Lee must share the movie, or at least a part of the pie. It becomes more his at the end, but do you feel like, as far as the structure goes, like, do you like these other characters, Williams and Roper?
I do. And I think it's sort of interesting because, at the beginning of the movie, we have the temple, and then we have things that are very 70s, and then we have this sort of uncertain island that maybe is the future, but we don't know. And we have sort of those same characters represented there. We have Bruce Lee, who's the very, the old martial arts. We have our 70s guy, Roper, and then we have somebody who might be the future in Williams, which, we know what happens to Williams. But I thought it was very interesting that, not only with the location did they get across those three things, but they did it with the characters also. So I liked having them. I thought, Bruce carries the movie, but those other things need to be represented in the movie.
I think that some degree emphasizes the tournament component of it. Again, like Mortal Kombat. I see that for sure.
These guys needed more. I loved the flashback scenes of them. I thought that was actually really well done. The three focused on fighters, Williams, Roper, and Lee, are all taking these sort of water taxis of the time to the junk to head that way, where they meet Parsons on there. But we see the background. We see Williams fight with the cops. We see that Roper's running away from the debt. Honestly, I think Roper's maybe finest kung fu foray was against the three debt collectors on the golf course. I think that was very quick. It looked fluid from him. I thought that looked good. Some of the other stuff in the movie seems not as well done. Like that being the first time that you see his kung fu is kind of sets you up like, oh wow, this white dude knows what he's doing. So I really wish had this is set up as a tournament, right? Tournaments, we're sportos, Russell, whether it's football or basketball, like tournaments are structured, and we don't have any structure to this tournament. I'm using air quotes here at all. So if there were some type of like lead up or some type of hype towards a particular matchup, we don't really know what's gonna happen in terms of who's going to end up facing who. Calling it a tournament, I believe it was just used in name alone. It was more of a bunch of exhibitions.
That is how it felt. You're right. I actually wanted more rounds of the tournament. Again, I keep saying things that I want more.
Yeah,
I want more Bruce Lee beating people up and mowing people down. But that's an opportunity to show Williams and Roper mowing people down too.
Yeah, but I did really like having them in the movie. Yeah. I thought they needed to be there. There's not, a segment of society or culture that's not, or the ones that we know that are not in this movie.
It's through Roper's eyes that we see what Han's mission with this really is too. Like, he's like, I wanted you to become my North American guy. Like,
yeah.
So
yeah,
that's how you see the underbelly of the operations and stuff. It's through selling it to him. And boy, he goes all out right away, as opposed to like, I feel like if I were going to try and rope somebody in, I would only show them the glamorous parts and not people in cages.
He's bad at personnel management, man. He's got 6 bodyguards. He's got 3,000 students, but he only has 2 dudes who are working in like the underground power plant of evil, and they both need to wield. One guy's got a dolly, and the other guy's like helping him work the dolly. Like, you need better hiring practices before you start expanding into North America. Yes, Russell, you said that we're starting to sound a little critical, let me just go ahead and make this the drop point now. I am extraordinarily critical of this movie, and I've been kind of playing nice so far. There's a lot to say about this movie, and what I'll do before we move on too far is say, Meredith, I know you said something about like the plot being kind of modern. To me, the plot doesn't matter here because it's, honestly, to me, it's a mess. It doesn't matter. We're here to see Bruce Lee Kia. We're here to see Bruce Lee do some awesome stuff. We are just delighted with Jim Kelly's debut, as doing some incredible martial arts of his own.
He is good.
Yeah, he is good. I know that like sort of a behind the scenes thing is that the filming with John Saxon, I believe Bruce Lee was worried that for American audiences they would try to cut the movie to make it like Saxon, that Roper was the main character. So like there's a lot of stuff about like the plot here and the tournament that's not really a tournament, and the motivations of Lee's character, a sister who was killed, but he didn't actually know that it was Han's organization until the day before he leaves. There's a lot of stuff that's a mess here. And I do not want this to be like Dustin being too critical forward of a podcast. So I'm going to step back a little bit and I will just kind of wait in the wings.
I think that they were trying to start something bigger, to be honest with you. I think that their sequels were almost for sure going to happen, especially given how much money it made. I think Agent Lee and perhaps Saxon could have been back for more.
That would have been great.
I think that they were starting a franchise, like their own little Mission Impossible.
Yeah, I think so too.
Like their own James Bond. So some of these ambitious, slow starts, go back and watch Dr. No. See how slow moving it seems in comparison. Go back and watch the first Mission Impossible movie, which was our first episode that we ever did on Retro Movie Roundtable with Meredith. And
cool.
compare that though to like where Mission Impossible becomes like, Ghost Protocol and stuff like that. It's so much faster, but there's this degree of, I feel like we're setting the table for something far bigger than this movie, and unfortunately, he dies.
Yeah. You know what? That's a good point that I didn't consider. That, I mean, the movie, it's called Enter the Dragon. It's how I start most of my plot summaries, is enter on, like it is a set the table type of even title. So yeah, if
Return of the Dragon, Revenge of the Dragon,
Way of the Dragon. Yeah. I'm wondering if Way of the Dragon was the movie you saw that you thought was this movie, the one with Chuck Norris.
Well, I don't know, but there is another movie that I think maybe is what you saw, but I'll have to Google it to see if I'm thinking correctly.
I really don't know. Maybe it was Fist of Fury. I don't know. Like I said, I had a roommate my freshman year. Said, "You've never seen any Bruce Lee?" And he goes over and he pulls something out and he's like, "We're watching this right now." So it wasn't like it was more of a, and I was like, yeah. I was like, I thought he started me on Enter the Dragon, but I don't think I did.
Well, to be fair, a lot of these movies have different names depending on where they were released, and some of the names are exactly the same as other titles based on the translation.
Yep.
So that can create some confusion. And the other thing is, if you're relying on your freshman roommate to like introduce you to something mind blowing, like I want to believe that he was a big Bruce Lee fan. But since then, we need to honor and respect what Bruce Lee has done. But since then, we've been gifted with so much in terms of the breadth of how awesome our kung fu movies have been since then, that, yeah, you can have the respect for like an originator, but there's so much since then that has been, I will just go out and say, so much better.
I
don't know.
But this is the one that has the guy. It's like the Michael Jordan of kung fu. So you might have some other great players, and the movies are better made. And to your point, there's probably be better writing, definitely. But the guy goes a long way, I think. And I mean, we should talk about his rise. Like he was a child actor in over 20 films. He taught American actors how to do kung fu, like Steve McQueen. And his the Green Hornet, like a supporting role, was what made him break through over here. And he was a sidekick, but he was the one that people were tuning in to be captivated by. He stole the show completely. And the Kato show, it was more the Kato show than it was about the Green Hornet. So, again, this is the first foray into American cinema, and I was thinking the producers even said, we got to get a white guy in here and we got to get a black guy in here because everybody's like, this is the introduction of, this very Asian thing, and, we're going to try and diversify the people in this so that I'm sending it to this market with the intention of digesting it. And they definitely produced and put a lot of promotion behind this. This was heavily promoted. They knew they had something, and the returns were tenfold from what they put into it.
Well, and I think something that this movie did that is, for a while, was kind of unique to either martial arts movies or Westerns is that, they're not afraid to go to the places that don't look so great. Like when they're all going in on those boats to that, the little, what do you call them, skimmer boats?
Yeah.
And what is it? Williams says something like people around here don't live so good or something like that.
Ghettos are the same everywhere.
The ghettos are the same everywhere.
Same
so
Williams.
In that, in that respect, it's very unique.
Yeah. Now, we talked about that he's going to die soon after this. Meredith, is there anything about Bruce Lee's death that you feel like we just got to talk about?
I read that he died of was it an overdose?
In the report, there's something in his system, but it's not something so wild, or it's not something that immediately points to illicit drugs. But when I read it, I thought
it was a painkiller or something, and it makes you wonder, because I know he had an injury earlier in his life. This is a hard job to do. I mean, it takes a real toll on your body. I mean, was he, in pain all the time? So that, that's what makes me kind of sad about it. But
it was actually during this movie creation that the problems really started to manifest for him. Like he was doing post-production, doing voice dubbing for himself in a sound studio in 73. And he started shaking and vomiting. And they took him to the hospital and took him a couple days to be able to speak again. And he had something called cerebral edema and the swelling of the brain. And 2 months later, this is when it happened. And you're right, he did smoke hash and at another actress's house. And the producer for that came over to see things, and he had a headache, and he lied down. And you're right, that actress, Betty Ting Pei was her name. She gave him a painkiller named Equagestic, I think, which is contains.
I don't know.
It's a combination of aspirin and a tranquilizer, and he had done this before actually, and he went to sleep, but he just didn't wake up, and he had that cerebral edema come back, and autopsies showed that his brain swelled up 13% larger than it was, and there's not a lot of room in your head for that.
Yeah, and he was wonderful at what he did for a living, but it makes you wonder how much all of that is actually worth it physically.
Yeah, right. Maybe through training, maybe he took blows to the head. It's hard to say. He was only 32, so he was right
but
in his prime.
He was really, really hard on himself physically.
He avoided grains. Things that dictate our diets today, and the things that work with people that are trying to be fitter. These are things that Bruce was doing before anybody else. It is at the very least a tragedy, and something that it's almost unfair. I think there's a total of the movies to see of him. There's 5, like the big time movies with him starring, and that is just so sad to think of, that there could have been so much more. But if anything, having his name as the legacy to what we are lucky to have today, it is truly because of his pioneering, not just starring role, but just his push to try to make this something that would have such mass appeal, which it does and continues to today.
So both co-stars actually look like they can do really decent martial arts themselves. Jim Kelly, who plays Williams, as well as the John Saxon as Roper. These guys are actually trained themselves, and so it's this movie doesn't seemingly have a lot of big name power at the time, but they have the skills, and that's how they got the job. So Jim Kelly was founded a martial arts studio in Los Angeles in 1971, and he was a karate champion. So he replaced Rock Tarkington, who quit the movie 3 days before production was due because he thought the pay was too low. So kind of a last-minute fill-in, but it just turned out well because he looks like he's got the right moves himself. I mean, what do you think about the main villain here, Han? We haven't really talked much about him.
I thought he was okay. I think he could have been less over the top sometimes, but I think he was okay. He was, not quite an equal to Bruce Lee, if that makes sense.
It goes without saying. Yeah. We know that. Shih Kien has like a pedigree of martial arts movie, and you see his skills in the movie, but he is a little older. I think he is a great figurehead for this organization, and I think maybe that's what he should have been mostly, as opposed to also being kind of the end fight for Lee. There are other people on the island and we see a lot of it for Lee to fight, and for the others to fight as well. But it's something where I think he portrays menacing, and he portrays what does he say? We do business in corruption. Yes, it's something like, even the dialogue isn't necessarily great to me, but it gets the point across. Like, you don't have to serve on a silver platter. Hi, I'm the bad guy, but they do a good job of like, okay, yeah, he is he's not just one type of bad guy. He's three types of bad guys. Not only are women found dead outside of the island, or like washed ashore, but they're also distributing drugs. I don't know exactly what the imprisoned people are there for, but that's just another, that's another layer on that cake, is that like, oh no, he's a bad guy. And I think he portrays that. Then you add in the opulence, you add in the we're not going to call it brainwashing, but you add in, like, you have a dedicated amount of people that are devoted to him. That comes from something. We don't know what it comes from. We don't know why. Let's make the Bond connection again. We don't know why Blofeld's henchmen are Blofeld's henchmen. We don't know why Scaramanga has Knick-Knack or whoever. Like, we don't know why these guys are drawn to these people, but they are. And I think Han stands out that if you needed a job as a henchman and Han rolled through, you'd be like, okay, yeah, I can get on board with that guy.
It's not hard to believe, though. I mean, you got these ghettos. You just go say, hey, I've got a little bit of money for you. I mean, it's pretty simple, really.
Well, sometimes it seems to be a little bit cult-like with Han.
True. Like,
when the girls coming in who throw the darts, I mean, they seem to be a little bit not all there as far as what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, I think they are dependent on, if not opium, something else. They're dependent on a drug. Which is another theme that Hollywood has drawn from 1,000, if not a million times, is that, like, oh, this is something that happens. You get a working girl dependent on something, and then that's going to happen. It's why Jim Kelly loses the fight. One, he gets distracted by a bird, and then two, he's in a room filled with some type of has to be some type of smoke or vapor that has him lose his senses. Because I think Jim Kelly is more than a match for Han as well. Sorry, Jim Kelly. I think Williams is more than a match for Han.
Jim Kelly keeps messing with me. I keep thinking about the quarterback from the Buffalo Bills from the 90s.
Bills. Yeah.
I know it's really causing me difficulty.
Yeah, another guy who didn't win the big one.
The actor who played Han, though, Kien, did I do that right?
I have Shih Kien. I don't know.
I think that's right. Yeah.
In real life, he's a close friend of Bruce Lee's father. Actually, they worked together in a Cantonese opera business, and Kien worked as a makeup artist to Bruce's dad, and he was close to him that he called him his nephew. And during breaks of Enter the Dragon, this is a little bit creepy. Kien, told Bruce Lee, he's like, Bruce was tired, and he said, I had this premonition, uncle, that you will live longer than me. And it haunted Kien because he did. And, and he tried to caution himself even when he said that. He's like, don't force yourself too hard into stardom. you're overworking yourself. And that sat with him for the rest of his life because that all came to be true. So kind of a spooky moment. Hollywood, I don't know.
That is spooky.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, but how old was his son when he died?
Brandon.
Not as old.
Yeah, not even as old as Bruce Lee.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of tragedy
Yeah.
for one family. Yeah, his son dies, I think, at 28. And I don't want to go too far off the road onto Brandon Lee's.
Yeah.
Small but fun casting notes is we see Jackie Chan in this. Did you spot Jackie Chan, Meredith?
I was very delighted.
I missed him. Where was he?
He was in the cave. But not the cave, the sort of the
Underground
dungeon kind of
facility.
place.
Yeah.
He's one of the people who Bruce Lee schools, and he's the guy who gets his neck snapped before Bruce Lee looks at the camera and goes, "Oh!"
Can I say that's the best? That's maybe the most entertaining part of the movie is when he's underneath in that facility, and you've got so many underlings heading his way. Because that's when he fights with the, I guess, bow staff. That's when he fights with the two batons. That's when he takes the nunchucks off. None of the guys know how to use nunchucks except for him. I don't even know why you equip your guards with nunchucks if you don't know how to use them. Because Bruce Lee immediately disarms the guy and then starts using his. So that's a really entertaining scene to see him with the weaponry.
They made nunchucks illegal in the UK because everybody wanted them coming off of this. So, maybe those were British. Maybe those were British henchmen. That's why they can't use nunchucks. I want to, but I can't.
Yeah, nobody to train him with it. I mean, there's even a comical little scene. And for the record, there's some humor in this movie. And any time that you get a little bit of humor, I think with these particular 1970s kung fu movies, of which I've seen many, there is kind of the Chinese influence of like when there's a joke, they let it land and they linger on it a little bit, like Parsons in the boat, in the little dinghy, like that could have ended 5 to 10 seconds earlier, but like that way of filmmaking is going to be like, no, we're gonna laugh at this guy in the boat, ha ha ha. The kids are laughing, and Bruce Lee smiles, and it's kind of an iconic move to like linger on the joke for that long. But there's a guy walking through guarding like the palace at night, and he's just swinging around his nunchucks, and he like almost knocks over a vase. Like they don't know how to use it. Give him a gun. No guns on the island. Like,
or like when
taser.
Williams doesn't want to eat the food in the
That's right.
in the first day that they're on the island.
That's right. And I think the thing he's turning down are duck wings.
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Delicious looking duck wings too.
So
I don't know what the problem was there.
So, Dustin, one of the things that makes me think that the messiness that you were referring to could be a result of how this movie came to be. There was tension and arguments between Bruce Lee and producer Raymond Chow, and one would end up with like Lee storming off the set. He was so mad. He wanted to have this input. He wasn't just a star who was coming to read his lines. He wanted to vault himself into stardom with this, and he was really concerned with whether the West would accept a Chinese hero in his movie and his new approach. And according to director Robert Clouse, the screenwriter and he butted heads a lot. And Michael Allen made flippant remarks to Lee along the way, saying like, "Don't worry about it. We're only making this movie because it's cheap and because people just want to see you fighting. It's not a fine piece of literature." When your screenplay writer is taking that attitude with you, even though it's so important to Bruce Lee, that was a factor in how this movie came together. Alan kind of had issues with Lee and even wrote more R's into the script to make Lee insecure because he knew he had a hard time with his R's, and so Lee was mad and he refused to work with him anymore and demanded a new script. And the director kind of just tried to smooth things over, but Bruce Lee even encountered the screenwriter in the streets, like out of set in Hong Kong later, and that friction simply has to have paid its toll to what you're talking about here, and that could be another reason why this doesn't seem like it comes together as much. There's a tug of war happening.
And there's some story, that I've read a couple places about the fact that Roper in the original screenplay was supposed to be the one who's killed,
That's right.
midway through the movie, and Williams survives. So there was a change, and I think probably not everybody was happy about that.
Yeah. Jim Saxon's agent didn't want him to be the one that died and wanted him to live on. And, like I said, I think we're building up to sequels in this. So Jim Kelly was the one who ended up having to be killed off. So you're
That's
not wrong
unfortunate
about that.
because what we're describing of Roper dying and Williams continue on, that would have been. I mean, we're talking about hypotheticals here. Sorry, we're talking about the counterfactual, the thing that did not happen. That would have been so much better. I would have loved to seen that. I'm sure audiences would have loved to seen that. Williams and Lee, Kelly and Lee as Williams and Lee in The Dragon 2, whatever. Like this, that was set up to be so incredible. Russell, your points about production hell and the fights between these, we do get too many cooks in the kitchen. We get an issue where the things that are messy about this movie are very messy. And it's only because Bruce Lee is who he is, and this was his last movie, and that this was... there are some things that stand out, and we can pull... most of those will come up in my superlatives, at least. There are some things that linger on forever. John Saxon's name would be forgotten if it weren't for this. This is the only thing he'll be remembered for.
But there's a reason they didn't go get a big name, though. Like, he had the moves for it, though. It's like, that's why you didn't just
he did
go
have some
get,
moves. He had some moves. But the strange thing is I'd love to revel in this movie for it being a 91%, 95% rated movie. When you said, IMDb is at like 7.7, I don't know why that was. I'm like, I do. It's because people are starting to view this not as like an untouchable piece of media that is in the Library of Congress. They're looking at it as like, oh, this is a movie. I'm going to watch this movie. Is it an A+ movie? I think a lot of watchers are saying not really, and it's because the mystique and the prestige of what the movie has and deserves isn't preserving it past like the critical eye. People are saying like, yeah, I don't really get what his sister's doing there. Braithwaite says we have a woman on the inside. Her name's Mei Ling. Is that right? Mei Ling?
Mei Ling.
And he hands a picture that's like a glamour shot of Mei Ling. And what's she even doing there? We don't really know. She does one thing, which is she does two things. She provides Lee the cover of spending the night with a girl so that way he can leave the room. That's the passive thing she does. The active thing she does is she opens the cages with all the drunk prisoners, which Lee could have done himself. So, that is one of many little things that are just kind of messy about this movie, but I will talk forever about the messiness of this movie if you let me. So I'll just say it makes sense that the production issues do stand like they do leave a mark on this movie. I
think what you're picking up on, it could be a result of that. Meredith, as in terms of the style and presentation, Robert Clouse gave us. What are the parts that you like in terms of how he's presenting this movie?
Well, one of the major parts that I like is, the acting without talking, the communicating without talking. It happens frequently in action movies. I think it was a little less popular in other types of movies of that era. There's a whole lot of speaking. But I also like his use of color, and I think that's sort of held on in movies. There was a long time where movies that were very serious and very action-driven and gritty were sort of muted tones. And Enter the Dragon is not that. There's a lot of bright reds and yellows and golds. Everything they can think of is in there. Another thing I like is the use of lighting in this movie. There's sort of a symbolism to it where they really take advantage of the outdoors when they are outdoors, but when they're, underneath in that sort of dungeon type bunker area, it almost gets noir-like. Like there's two different worlds. There's the outside where you can kind of breathe a little bit, and then there's the underbelly of this where it's just horrible. So... yeah, I really appreciate that about this movie.
I love the contrasting shadow world underneath for sure. You know, Clouse had a hard time making this movie. It was each morning the sound stages had to be cleared of stray dogs, and squatters were, sleeping on couches and on the floor of the soundstage. There was a shortage of translators, so the people couldn't speak Chinese to English very well for the people who were making the movie. Many of the fight scenes were choreographed and rehearsed and filmed in just 8 days, so things had to come together very quick.
And that's amazing. That's just... I can't even imagine doing that in that amount of time.
Stuntmen had fights breaking out between rival families of the triads. I mean, old Hollywood sometimes has like these ridiculous stories. See the Wizard of Oz episode for tons of hilarious old stories that like will take your breath away. But this movie does sound like it's we're getting far along in history to have this many problems, and that's not even getting into the interpersonal problems that Bruce Lee was having. So it's really interesting. Even a young woman's body was found near the set that halted filming. So I mean, all kinds of things are just going wrong for this, and Bruce Lee didn't even show up to work for the first several days because he had like nerves, because he knew that this was his big moment. This was his big entry into the West, and he had anxiety and did not come into the early shooting. Robert Clouse had to deal without a star and filming other scenes with Jim Kelly and Saxon and other people in Han around that, even though he was supposed to be there. So you're shifting your schedule around, your star's not even there. I mean, you got to give him credit. I mean, he pulled it together for something that people got truly enthralled by, but the difficulty in making this probably also contributes to the messiness in addition to the writing and the production side of things too. So not saying that it's tight and clean, but there probably are reasons for this.
Yeah, and to do that, and I forgot to mention this earlier, but to deal with all of that, and then there's such sort of strategic camera operation in this movie. There's a very strategic use of slow motion, which I think is very interesting, and it's sort of like the predecessor to the bullet time that you have in The Matrix.
Yeah, that's true.
Or like even in the Justice League, the way the Flash moves around.
Zack Snyder's Justice League is a lot of slow-mo.
Yeah, but I think that's a case of overusing it. But to get all those technical, unique, almost experimental things to work amongst all of that is just a tremendous feat.
I thought it was fascinating just as an architect to see Hong Kong and how different it looked. And I did not even realize initially that we were in Hong Kong. It has built up so rapidly. Like if you go look at images and aerials of Hong Kong today, and then you go back and watch this movie, it is just staggering, the sheer change that city's undergone. And it's amazing. I liked the palace that they had gotten too. And
Me too.
like those battlegrounds that they're on are just, those are tennis courts, by the way. They even left the lines painted on. I didn't notice it until I
didn't notice.
But yeah, they just took the nets down and the poles down and went into fight mode. And it's just so amazing that the locations that they had found. And I think this movie is really interesting as a time capsule for what Hong Kong used to be like, because it's unidentifiable today. Just that was a strange novelty for me to get. But in the beginning, when they moved through the streets and where the docks were, I wanted just a longer travelogue of all that's going on there, because I think that's a big part of this appeal to this movie too. You're immersing the Western viewers into a world that's just, today we have the internet and you see so many things coming to your doorstep, but even in 1973, there's a real exotic flair for this. And I think you can't undersell what that did for movies of espionage like Bond and these movies. People were genuinely excited to see these places, but they just didn't know about existing or couldn't visit themselves.
Oh yeah, and you don't get that much in movies today.
It's hard to surprise people.
So much of it is even fake.
They try really, really hard to find great locations, but it's a much more difficult task than it used to be to blow people away, for sure. So, Another set design piece I want to just call out is the Hall of Mirrors. The director got the idea for that, and there was a restaurant that had a lot of mirrors in there, and so they built this set for the final showdown of 8,000 mirrors. And again, I love the Man with the Golden Gun. Some people are a little hard on that one, but the final showdown that Bond has in Man with the Golden Gun is in a room full of mirrors, and here it is directly taking influence from this movie. So
yeah, and it's such a, they set up right in the beginning the whole images thing, which, with the in the temple, in the conversation at the very beginning of the movie with his taking master, down the images.
Yeah, the enemy has illusion, and you break them down, something like that. That is something that I feel like Bruce Lee felt was important to do, is if we're going to have this come around full circle, have it come around full circle in the Tao of what I believe, and the practice of what it is that I'm truly introducing to the West, which is Asian lead and martial arts movie forward. That needs to be in the forefront, and because it does come back to it, I feel like that's something that if Bruce Lee is watching this afterwards, right, in heaven or whatever, what's the thing he's happiest about? It probably the idea that the words, like speaking the power into the words of what it is to describe martial arts in a very short amount of time through dubbing, and then having it come to fruition in a final scene, I would say that is something he would be proud of. I would think.
Oh, he fought for that to be in there. That's like, totally. For him, that's the moment where Alec Guinness tells Mark Hamill in Star Wars like what the Force is. Like, it's supposed to be that profound.
Yeah, and there's something he says, and I read this on Wikipedia just before we got on here. Bruce was talking about Jeet Kune Do, and he said, Jeet Kune Do is merely a name used as a mirror in which we see ourselves. So the mirror, I think, must have been a recurring thing for him in his life.
Meredith, are there any other fun atmospheric notes that you want to call attention to?
The scene where Roper is talking to Han, and Han has his hand on this sort of, it's not a lever, but it's like one of those mechanical pull-down things, and you think that he is going to pull down the guillotine on the top of this cat. Yeah. But it's actually the pull for the elevator. And I thought that was just wonderful. It's like that scene in Indiana Jones where the guy comes in with this, what you think is like an instrument of torture, and it turns out to be a coat hanger. I think that's in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I remember that.
But I'd seen this movie before, and I had totally forgotten about that, and I just found it very amusing.
Is Han's razor hand a forerunner for Wolverine?
I think probably.
Oh, no, don't connect those things.
You do see weapons like that in history. And I've actually seen them in catalogs and things, and I'm always disappointed that they're so big. Like it would never fit on a girl's hand. But yeah, I think probably. I mean,
I'm not kidding. Wolverine debuts in the comics 1 year after this.
Wow. I'm what comes to mind is the katar or the hand scissor. Things that were used, they were mainly, they're not slashing weapons. They're more like piercing, punching style weapons that are just so sharp that they would go through flesh quite in that way. But the closest similarity to me used in media was Vega's claw in the Street Fighter movie, which has its problems, but it also has Raul Julia. So I can't.
Another movie we wouldn't have without this movie, for sure.
Absolutely. And the I know that that Shih Kien could have done so much more. I believe that the use of the prosthetics hindered his martial arts skill. But somebody had to say, we need this old man who's going up against Bruce Lee to have a shot. What's going to give him the shot? Oh, interchangeable hands. But what you will see in the way that he uses his body is that you can see that he's holding on to the thing that holds the blades, and it's taking away from his natural movement. And that is maybe I'm not saying I have some type of eagle eye on this, but I think it would have been better if you just left him to his own devices and his own training. You know, let the fighting, let the blocking happen.
So one of my favorite special effects is that Bruce Lee has a tiny little bag, and it has a mile long of rope, and I think that his little fanny pack or little satchel that he's got seems to hold thousands of feet of rope. And I have to ask, did Mary Poppins' bag producer make his bag? That was just one of those things that kept was like, you know, he's just walking around the island with this tiny little pouch, and so
Bag of holding.
I know. So that's my special effects note. Dustin, soundtrack. I mean, Nathan's not here. What are we gonna do?
Well, this is really something that I'm not going to say saves the movie, but it elevates the movie. Particularly while you were describing the architectural elements of Hong Kong, I'm thinking of the sort of the disco guitar that's happening when we're seeing Williams and we're seeing Roper kind of make their way to where they're going. We have some really good. There's a particular suite that is started on the boat where I guess 4 of our main combatants are headed to the island. That we get it kind of spliced, kind of bisected with the visual introductions of Bolo and the assistant Tanya. While they're awaiting them on the docks, we get kind of an ominous like hit, and then that suite comes back in during the banquet. I think there's a lot of good musical cues and hits here in this. But as far as audio is concerned, what stands above the soundtrack is Bruce Lee's distinctive kias, like
the kill
his
face
style. Well, the kill face is one, but just like there's a whole, you know, you think of tennis players with their grunting. There's probably 10 to 15 tennis players that if you just played me audio of their sound when they hit it, I could tell you who it is without seeing them. And Bruce Lee is one of those, like, you know what he sounds like. And there are people that still like mimic that style in terms of like their use of ki when they're doing martial arts. And I think the thing that one audio big the sound or the volume of the sound effects, and like the when you know, fist hits its fist or face, and like that, sometimes that can seem like over the top or too much, but I kind of almost feel like it's endearing to me, like it's that too much, that high volume, the high, what the word I'm looking for is kind of like a snap to it. There's too much, but it's kind of like indicative of the era. And
it's what we're here for.
Yeah. And that's another thing we're here for is Bruce Lee's kill face, Bruce Lee flying dragon kick with that particular, you know, shout from the diaphragm is just so very cool. There's a reason why those clips, like, thank you YouTube or whatever video platforms, those clips will live on forever.
Now, Meredith, this soundtrack sells 500,000 copies. It goes gold, and it's a fusion between Asian and like American funk. Like, it's kind of an influential soundtrack. Do you like it?
Oh, it is. I do like it. It's like a collage of all the characters that are there in the movie. One thing that I particularly like is in some of the scenes where we're focusing on Lee fighting on his own, we have those slow motion pieces, and there's it's an instrument that kind of sounds like a theremin, but I'm not sure that that's what it is. But it takes you to this totally sort of like primeval, you know, beginning of the world type of realm. That, you know, it exists out of time. It's not 70s. It's not, you know, far in the past. It's not futuristic. It's just totally him in the moment.
I think that's
I thought that was
Chinese
wonderful.
Fiddle, and we do see somebody playing that during Han's introduction during the banquet. When Roper says to Williams, like, keep an eye out for the referee. They do like a close-up shot of one of the one of the musicians like giving the eye to everybody, like looking around the room, and I think he's playing the Chinese fiddle, but I'm no expert on that. But that would be my guess. The thing that sounds closest to the theremin, like what you said. Very cool sound.
It's not something you hear that much or ever in other movies.
There's some good sleuthing spy music too when he's creeping around at night or through the caverns, and when it all goes full out tilt, like the battle's on, that's when the music is just like somehow this funky, smooth, flowing music. It has a funness to it that then says the mayhem is happening, and here it is. Like somehow it makes it more fun.
Yeah, and one of you guys may have to fact check this before you put it out, but was the guy who did the music, did he do the original theme to Mission Impossible?
I believe that is accurate. I don't have it.
Okay.
I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe that's accurate.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's another, little piece of music that it'll never leave your head.
Yes.
Yep.
Are you guys ready to hand out some awards?
Oh, yeah.
MVP Meredith, do I need to ask?
No, you really don't, but it's Bruce Lee.
Yeah, Dustin, Bruce Lee?
It's Bruce Lee. It absolutely. Some of the moves, the headlock into the leg snap on Han, the grab the back of the head, throw to the ground, the flying dragon kick. You get all the hits from him in this movie.
Yep. We've talked about him up to this point almost exclusively, so it's his. So, best supporting actor, Meredith.
Angela Mao.
Oh, nice choice. Yeah, so I'm not shocked. You definitely had a lot of good points to have her in this.
She should have been in it more. I really felt for her when she was in it. So
yeah. Dustin, best supporting.
She owns her martial arts scene for sure, and she convincingly makes that self-sacrifice, even though she should have been in the movie more. That's my best supporting too, Angela Mao.
Okay, well, it's okay. I'll be a little bit different here. I'm going to pick Han's character, Kien. Hidden gem, Meredith.
I think it's the music. This, it's a movie that sounds unique, and people have tried to come close afterward, but never quite have done that.
It's one of the best pieces of the crafted parts of this movie. It's a very good selection, and a movie that struggles with writing and was challenged for directing. The music is definitely well crafted, so that's a very good choice. Dustin, Hidden gem.
I know we're moving fast, but I got two. The first one is Braithwaite is served Lipton tea. There's my eagle eye moment. He's served Lipton tea, which it's not crazy because Lipton was actually founded in Scotland.
Look for that.
The second thing is in the background when Lee is fighting like three of the uniformed fighters on the last morning. After the Bolo fight, one of the extras in the back is just smiling the biggest smile of just like, oh my God, Bruce Lee's fighting in front of me. Like it's the face that Russell would have if he was an extra, like in a scene where James Bond like Sean Connery says to the girl some line, and the girl right before she goes, oh James, like you just see Russell's big grinning face, like oh awesome, it's happening. That's what this guy was. He was just like, oh hell yeah, I'm watching Kung Fu. And like he's a bad guy. He shouldn't look like that. But that's my hidden gem. Is he just can't. He's over the moon that he gets to watch this.
No, that's a very good choice. Mine's gonna be somebody else I want to see more of as well. But I'm gonna go with Bolo Yeung on this one. So,
Yes.
He's listed here as Yang Sees, but he goes by Bolo from here on out, and he's in Bloodsport.
He changes his name to Bolo. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean he's awesome, and I wish we could see more menace from him.
Oh, totally. You're 100% right here. He's not misused, but he is underused, and it's confusing why he fights, like why he's used where, and he doesn't fight Lee.
No, I know that's what I want. I really want to see him mowing people down in the courtyard, and then even after Han's disposed, I want to see one more big showdown between Bolo and Lee. So
that would be so great.
It would be, yeah. Now, Meredith, recast somebody. If you had to recast somebody and put somebody else in their place, who would it be and why?
You're gonna hate this, but it's Bolo.
Oh
No.
I thought he was like from a cartoon. He just was too goofy. for this movie.
Do you have somebody else
goofy
we're going to
faces.
replace Bolo with my hidden gem?
I think you could have replaced him with any bigger martial arts guy that you could find.
Okay.
I just don't like him.
Ouch. Dustin.
He's like from Popeye the Sailor Man. I don't.
You know what's interesting? During that time, even the bigger martial artists still carry a little bit of heft, kind of like a UFC fighter in the off season, like when they drop weight. They look more like Sammo Hung does in the beginning of this movie. They look more like just a little heavier. He was unique as being like a bodybuilder too, which is why his body is closer to what you might expect a buff guy to look like today, which you don't see that much in the 70s movies.
If you could find a big guy who's more intense, I would be good with
Without
that.
a cartoony face.
Dustin.
Yes.
Recast somebody.
Hwang Jung Lee should be playing Han instead of Kien. Hwang Jung Lee is the guy who plays Thunderleg in Drunken Master.
Man, everybody's coming after my superlatives here. That was my best supporting too. So
He's of the right age to do it. And he has an incredibly unlikable face. So like he would be a good cast for him, and he would match Bruce Lee's intensity.
I'm coming after O'Hara for my recast with who was played by Robert Wall, and I'm going to put in Andrew Robinson. He's the villain from Dirty Harry. I just find him to be crazed, and he does a good villain. So I feel like he would be a better here for the guy who got this cut.
Mm-hmm. More of an actor.
Yeah, exactly, an actor. Best shot, Dustin.
My best shot is kind of an emotional answer, and Meredith hit on it a little bit. After they are betting on the praying mantis fight, Bruce Lee reaches his hand out to collect the money from Saxon. I know I use the actors' names there, but Bruce Lee's smile and like non-speaking acting there is so genuine, and it kind of makes me get sad that this bright shining star is this is the last we see of him like this. And it that shot encapsulates like the kind of joy he wants this kind of movie to bring to audiences, and it's just this is kind of it. So it's an emotional answer for me.
Meredith, best shot.
Well, so it's another scene that takes place in this sort of underground realm of the island, but it's the scene where there's just guy after guy coming at Lee, and it's like right when he he doesn't have his shirt on in this scene, but he has this stance at the end of that just when I saw it, I thought, when you think of Bruce Lee in your mind, that's what you think of. That him in that sort of stance, ready to go. It's like what they say before, I don't hit, it hits on its own. It's like that's the beginning of that in the movie.
Yep.
So, that's my favorite.
He is an incredibly built guy, and I'm shocked he doesn't take his shirt off more in this one. I thought with him making the movie, it'd be like a Matthew McConaughey thing. It was just like, so wait, I have to wear a shirt for this scene? Yes, Bruce.
Yeah. Like if there's any fan art of Bruce Lee, there's probably a lot of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Particular scene.
And it's more like the director's like, now, Bruce, now. So, my best shot's going to be the mirror room when Lee has the cuts on him and it zones in on him and he's gained his orientation and he's about to take the upper hand. To me, that's what I think of when I think of Bruce Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Best scene, Meredith.
I think I'm going to have to go with the same scene that we just talked about. Him in the underground, guy after guy. It's right after the snake business. I think that's...
The snake, by the way,
utility
is awesome.
snake.
Yeah, like he takes a cobra and he uses it to get the guards out of the room, and it's just so awesome. And I count that as part of the same scene in a way because it's this one big long run of Bruce Lee beating up 51 as the opponent count. And that's my scene too. Is why I just
it's the scene where his determination really turns on, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, the cover's blown and it doesn't matter. He's out to take names and kick butt. So for sure, that's to me it's just a blast. And all the other things that weren't maybe working before, to Justin's point on the plot, you get to this and you go like, I'm having a lot of fun. I have to say.
Yeah, no, when you say covers blown doesn't matter, nothing matters because the plot doesn't matter because we're here just to see the fighting.
Dustin, is this your best scene too, or do you have another one?
It's the best kung fu scene, but I think my best scene, maybe favorite scene, is when he's sneaking through the grounds and the palace at night. The music is good, the guards are moving, and he's moving silently, and you have to believe that it's for real silent. Like, you can believe that he could move around you in your living space right now. Bruce Lee could be following you silently, and you would believe it because like of just how lithe and nimble he is. And so I was really immersed at that time in the movie. Like, ooh, wow, that's real. I liked that.
Yeah. Now, Meredith, best wardrobe or makeup?
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah, best wardrobe or makeup moment.
I think probably for wardrobe, it's got to be Williams. I mean, he's right at the turning point, and you know, if they made that suit that he's wearing in Hong Kong for women today, I would wear that. You know, the red bell bottoms with the jacket,
with the turtleneck.
I think that,
and his fro.
Yeah, I would,
and his fro too.
Yeah, it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, makeup, I think actually a lot of the women, even though they were, you know, not all there, they had some interesting makeup, and I think it was probably pretty modern for the time. A lot of really graphic shapes, not a lot of illusion or blending or anything like that, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Now, Dustin, best wardrobe or makeup moment?
You asked her first, so she beat me to it. It was Jim Kelly's turtleneck and suit combo. Honestly, both of the Americans wear that same similar combo. Roper wears kind of a gray suit. You'll notice that the pants before the 2000s were much higher on men. The waist was higher where it was, and so like that high gray waist with the black turtleneck also looks really good on Roper. But Jim Kelly steals the show with his look.
My best wardrobe moment would be the lack of wardrobe for again, Bruce Lee takes off his shirt and he's the most chiseled dude in the world. So I mean, the no wardrobe, I guess, is
well,
my pick.
And the pants for Bruce Lee, the black pants. When you think of, you know, a high class martial artist, that's what you think of.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
And a close second would be hand blades.
Yeah. That's really a prosthetic, though.
What are you going to wear today, sir? I think I'll pick the hand blades.
Yes. Change one thing, Meredith.
I've already talked about it, but the death of the sister. And it's a big thing, but yeah.
No, that's a good one. Dustin, change one thing, and only one thing.
Have Lee fight Bolo, because secretly Han is just the visual figurehead and Bolo's the secret mastermind of everything.
Oh, like Ra's al Ghul.
And I wasn't going to say that, like to avoid spoilers for another movie. But yes, I have that written down, like Ra's al Ghul. But essentially, the thing that matters is have Lee fight Bolo.
Wow, yeah, that's a very... I alluded to that earlier, and that was kind of my pick, so I'm just going to give you a runner-up then, because that is mine as well.
It's the best pick. You picked well.
Yeah. So just for diversity's sake, I'll say the movie slows down when he first gets to the island and they're undercover and they're womanizing. I feel like you can have like, oh, there's a lot of pretty women here, but I feel like the movie slows down and loses a little gas at this point. I feel like Bond movies do the right amount of like, you know, there's a little bit of that titillation component to it, but I feel like this movie swims in it a little too long, and I think it loses some momentum, whereas you're just like, I'm on the island, something cool's about to happen. And you keep noticing I want to fast forward to the fight scenes, but this is just another moment where get me to those fight scenes. So,
yeah. There's a scene in one of the Rush Hour movies that's just like that with the women, and you think, well, this is a little weird. Let's get on with the story.
Is Chris Tucker picking multiple women like...
yes,
yeah. That has to be a direct homage.
I think it is, for sure.
Rush Hour movies are underrated, I think.
They are. Best quote, Meredith.
It's got to be, never take your eyes off your opponent, even when you bow, to imply that you can, even somebody you're bowing to, who you're learning from, who you respect, can still, you know, hit you upside the head or worse, kill you or something. I think that's very, very telling.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Always keep your eyes on your back on your opponent.
It's a really good lesson. It does bother me to death that Lee, when he bows to, I think, his second opponent in the, we'll say, tournament, he definitely takes his eyes off him.
The eyes off of
him. It makes me angry. But that was, I think I'd already turned on the movie a little bit. I was like, why aren't you keeping your eyes on him, Lee? Sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Dustin, what's your best quote?
It is defeat that you must learn to prepare for. I don't waste my time with it. When it comes, I won't even notice. Oh, how so? I'll be too busy looking good.
That's a good one. Yeah. I just have to do the iconic O'Hare throws a board in the air and smashes it with his fist.
Yes.
And then Lee smiles back at him and he goes, boards, no hit back. Or boards don't hit back. But yeah, that's an iconic one that you will see again with Karate Kid. Meredith, tell people again one more time where they can find your work.
You can find it at society6.com/Meredith Grey Robson.
All right. And if you want to hear more from Meredith, as we mentioned earlier, you can check out the Maltese Falcon episode of Retro Movie Roundtable, also the Mission Impossible episode, and the Legend episode. So she's quickly getting to be one of our most frequented and best guests. So now, it's that time where everything comes to a climax. This is where Bruce Lee takes out 51 people. Only this is it for the show. 5-star scale, half-star intervals. Meredith, what are you giving Enter the Dragon?
I'm going to give it 5 stars, even though it really should probably have 4.75 because of the sister. But it's so awesome. 5 stars.
Okay. Dustin, are you going to join her in the 5-star crowd?
We are going to bounce off of the ropes and come back hard. Bruce Lee adds stars to the movies he's in. This movie is such a mess, and I did not get into it that much. This movie is unfortunately overrated in the history of what it has brought to cinema. This movie is a 2-star movie.
Okay. Yeah, I detected it was going to go there, but I'm surprised you go below the 2.5 mark.
This is the lowest rating I've ever given a movie, and it's because
on the show, right?
On the show.
Yeah,
and it is a revisit. I knew what I was getting into, but there's not enough time for me to fully get into all of the stuff. I will say, I'm not the only one out there. There are others who are like, why do we all think this movie is like the incredible thing that it
the cat's
is
pajamas?
Not.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that say this is the best kung fu movie, and these people are just wrong. Is it super important? Yes. Is Bruce Lee incredible? Yes. But as a movie, especially, and as I could, if this was Kung Fu Movie Roundtable, I would be a guest every single week. This is one of my favorite genres. And this movie, it just isn't what everybody thinks it is. It is a below average movie.
I think what you are saying has a lot of truth to it, and I experienced that the first time I watched it, but then the second time I went through it, I started to really see the impact of it, and I think the experience I had a lot like this was when we did Forbidden Planet last year. I thought Forbidden Planet was a science fiction movie that was so deeply influential that the ripple effect is greater than the ride that it was itself. And this is a lot like that. So I'm going to give this a 4 stars because Bruce Lee has this magnetic quality that has not been reproduced. And I think that this is the one that starts everything. And I will totally echo all of your sayings, Dustin. I just think that the impact and how important it is, it's the dawn of a genre. There's a weightiness of film history and why it's important here that I think that I'm going into it and for its influence. But you're not wrong. I mean, if Bruce Lee doesn't die, or if this was the third major kung fu movie and another movie had started this roller coaster, I think I would be harder on it. You're not wrong.
Yeah, I'm being. It's because I did not want to weigh the podcast down with all of the things I wanted to. I won't use the word attack, but I could use the word attack of this movie. And so I didn't want to weigh the podcast down. But if you want a de facto Bruce Lee awesome fest that is a better put together movie, watch The Big Boss from a year before.
Okay.
I think that's what you want. I actually stopped watching Enter the Dragon to watch the end kung fu scene between Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris. I watched that scene in the middle of this movie just so I could remember how much I love Bruce Lee, so that I could finish this movie, which I consider a wreck. I love him, and always will. But the movie itself, to me, fails, and I'll stop. I'll take the hard interstate drive out of Negative Town.
That's okay, because I think part of my 4 is not just respect to what it did. At the end of the day, it is an awful lot of fun. I find myself saying, get me to the fun a little bit faster sometimes, but when it is fun, boy, it sure is fun. So, yeah.
It's one of those things for me. It's like you're watching it and you so want to know what happens that you don't care how you got there. That's how I feel about it, but
so
it's sort of fairy tale like to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Dustin, will you help me pick a movie for next time?
You got it.
All right. So we got some older films here. Option number 1, these are court case movies, classic court movies. Option number 1, 12 Angry Men from 1957. A jury holdout attempts to prevent a miscarriage of justice by forcing his colleagues to reconsider the evidence. Option number 2, Judgment at Nuremberg from 1961. In 1948, an American court in occupied Germany tries 4 Nazis judged for war crimes. And in option number 3, The Rack from 1956. A decorated Korean hero inexplicably collaborates with an enemy while interned in a PW camp and is court-martialed, starring Paul Newman.
I think our option has to be 12 Angry Men, Russell.
A dozen angry men it is. And Meredith, thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, yes. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Meredith.
Yep.
And thank you, Lords, Ladies, and Knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. So subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a like on Facebook. Like the show on Twitter at @movie_retro. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. And producing and providing this podcast is fun, but not free. So we invite you to support the show at our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/retromovieroundtable. Any contribution is much appreciated and will go towards making the show better for you, the listeners. As always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies, Dustin.
What are you waiting for? You're faster than this. Don't think you are. Know you are.